That was the bottom line for me. I play the bass for fun, really. It's about joy, and you're not afraid to blow it. Because there are times when you make a really bad mistake. You just do it, and that's part of learning.
Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Will Chernoff, and you're listening to the Rhythm Changes podcast, a home for creative, improvising, local music people. This show is an ongoing, open-ended series of conversations with folks who make their community fun and prosperous. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to follow this feed wherever you get your podcasts, and check out our website, rhythmchanges.ca. Our guest today is a generous soul whose career has been in education, but he's been learning to improvise musically since I met him at the 2014 Douglas College Summer Jazz Intensive. And he is now an improvising jazz double bassist who currently plays in the group Hamilton Street Swing. You can find him online by visiting baylis.ca/Jonathan, and here in the physical world, he is my neighbor in New West and the first in-studio, in-person guest on this show. So please welcome my neighbor, Jonathan Baylis.
Thanks, Will. That was very kind of you.
Well,
it's great to be with you.
I appreciate you coming to my music room and seeing it for the first time. I've not seen your music room, whether it's a living room or something else. What does your music room look like?
It's just a tiny bit larger than this. Just to the right of my front door. It's got a fireplace, got a window looking southeast, got my bass and a computer and a couch, and it's pretty comfortable.
I was lucky enough to walk around the neighborhood with you on a nice day. This isn't a very nice day, I wouldn't say. But I got to hear a little bit about your bass, and your bass sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was blessed to come across an 1890 Tyrolean flatback bass. I was looking at Rick Reynolds' basses, and he played quite a number of them, and they were beautiful and wonderful. And but this one stood out. It was just something. I hadn't heard a bass that sounded so good as this one. So I kept coming back to it, and one day I was able to purchase it. And so I've got this bass. When you see it, you can see that it has been repaired numerous times. The wood is glued back together again. So it's got all kinds of character on the face of it. But I just love the sound of it.
But that's not your first one, right?
No, I had another bass before that. It was a 1960 Hofner, German Hofner bass. That was a good bass. It was especially hearty bass. It was laminate, it's basically a plywood German bass. Good for rough and tumble in the car and out of the car and out gigging. Had it for years.
I love that you say rough and tumble because I have quite a definition about that. We're talking, of course, about upright basses, and mine is definitely one that's had its rough and tumble times. It's also a plywood instrument. It's a Samuel Shen. It's a student kind of bass. And my version of rough and tumble was for like 7 or 8 years, I took it around on transit everywhere. So I definitely put it through a lot, and I put its case through a lot. And the case that I did all that with is still in my closet here, but this instrument hasn't left my house in quite a while.
Yeah, well, I'm quite a bit more careful with this 130-year-old instrument.
No kidding.
And I never, ever leave it. Well, if I leave it in the car, my eyes are on the car.
Absolutely. I did ask another bass player in Vancouver how they would describe you from the time that you interacted with her, and she said, "He was a delight to work with, hardworking, committed, enthusiastic, and diligent." And that's from Jody Prosnick.
Oh, well, Jody, thank you, Jody. That's very complimentary. Was my inspiration to start playing the bass, actually. Yeah. She was teaching at a Douglas College Summer Jazz Intensive, and I was on faculty there teaching English language. And during my lunch break, I was sitting in the cafeteria, and she and her band were playing. I thought, that is my instrument, and that is my teacher.
Yeah, all right.
So I got a hold of her and eventually studied with her. I studied with Darren Radke for quite a number of years, actually, and then I got to study with Jody and then Renee Wurst most recently.
Yeah, okay, so you've had 3 upright bass teachers who are all jazz musicians.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. I've also had 3. We have 2 of them in common, Jody and Darren. I guess I never really took private lessons with Jody, actually, so I can't really say that. But she was my original inspiration to play as well, because I was at New Westminster Secondary School, and Kelly Prosnick was my band teacher. And so Jody and Jesse Cahill and Tilden Webb were some of the first people that she brought in. And Steve Caldestad, of course, to talk about jazz with us and introduce us to jazz. And I mean, I was already playing bass at the time, but that's when I started really getting into the upright, was after Jody came for the first time. And then I started following Jody and Jesse especially around town. So that's how I got into it, thanks to her as well.
Yeah, she radiates joy, and she was having so much fun and smiling from ear to ear. And I thought, I'm going to take that instrument up.
Yeah. And then Darren, I used to go down the hill here in New West to get lessons with him. I can't remember for exactly how long, maybe about a year, while I was at the high school. And he really helped me understand harmony and my instrument quite a lot. And he helped me get really nice and prepared for going to Capilano University, where I ended up going for 1 year. And during that year, I had my 3rd bass instructor, who was Andre Lachance. And I haven't had one since, so I'm still figuring out how to get that back into my life.
Yeah. Well, it makes a big difference to have a good teacher.
Was there anything that you understood from being a career teacher yourself, even though it wasn't in music, that helped you get on board when you were starting to take music lessons?
Absolutely. My training and education was adult ed, as well as linguistics and language ed.
That's perfect then.
Yeah. So, yes, a teacher, a skilled educator can enhance their own learning by working collaboratively with their teacher. It made a big difference for me.
Yeah, adult ed seems especially appropriate not because all music students are adults, because obviously they're not, but like you're coming to it as an aside or after you've already learned a lot of other things and you've done a lot of other primary, secondary, post-secondary education. You're doing music in parallel to that sometimes. So that's kind of a similar feeling as when you're an adult and you're trying to learn a language or a musical instrument. Is that kind of true? I don't know.
Yeah, it's true for sure. Breaking the whole field down into individual skills and knowing how much you can do in an hour, how much you can communicate in an hour, and how much you can expect a student to master in a week before the next lesson comes. All that timing stuff and sequencing and all that is it's really useful.
I think now of that time in 2014 at the Douglas camp, when you show up there having already being a figure on the Douglas campus, which seems like that's where you heard about it, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I did. And then I had some interactions when Jody and her band came and played. I learned about the program and I started talking to the faculty about it.
Yeah. I'm interested to know like what you thought of the teenagers like me who were there.
It was a pleasure to be one of, I think my recollection is that there were about 3 of us that were participants that were over 19 years old. And some of us were quite a ways over 19 years old. Like in our 50s. That was me.
Yeah.
There were some very bright kids, and most of them played way better than I did. Some of them were less patient with me.
Oh, no. Sorry to hear that.
Well, I didn't blame them, really. I mean, they'd get on stage and they expect certain things. You know certain things. And some of those I knew and others I came to learn about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where I fit in on that spectrum, so hopefully I wasn't that bad.
There was a little boy who kept putting his electric bass in the wrong place and it would fall off the chair. So I felt like I kind of had to parent him a little bit.
Oh, wow.
But I was already a very experienced parent, so.
And what about, you said there were 3 of you who were truly there as adult learners, right?
Yeah, well beyond 19 years old, yeah.
And you guys stuck together, right? You formed a little subgroup.
Yeah,
right,
we sort of had lunch together and that sort of thing. Yeah.
If you're somebody who wants to do something like learning to improvise musically, but anything like that, you'd really benefit from getting in there and doing some kind of intensive or workshop or series like that. If you're a lifelong learner and you're going into an environment like that, that can be intimidating for a lot of people. What would you say to them about what should you do or what should you keep in mind right away so that you don't feel intimidated?
Go there for fun. That was the bottom line for me. I play the bass for fun, really. It's about joy, and consider it low risk environment. It's sometimes when you get on stage and there's a couple hundred people sitting there or whatever it was, 50 to 100 people, you can get yourself into a space where it's intimidating. But if you're there just for fun and you're not afraid to blow it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can never be afraid to.
Because there are times when you make a really bad mistake.
Yeah.
You just do it, and that's part of learning.
Totally. Yeah, I've had many moments like that. I've blown it on stage in front of hundreds of people before, seriously. Yeah, sometimes it was my fault and sometimes less so, but I mean, you still get the same feeling.
That's right. And you have to go on and say, I don't care. I'm just going to have fun and I'm going to do the best I can, and that's all I can be expected to do.
Yeah.
And this is about learning. Mm-hmm. It's not about being paid a lot of money to perform.
Yeah. And it seems like it's about expectation management if you want to come in there and not be afraid. So it's like, if you have expectations of what you need to get out of it, and like, by the time I'm finished this workshop series, I need to be X or I need to have done Y, like that seems to be where that anxiety would come from.
Yes. I didn't come in. I was fairly early on in my bass playing.
Yeah. And I guess on my end, I didn't come in with a lot of expectations either, because it was just part of this like continuum of a whole bunch of things like that I was doing. So there wasn't like a whole bunch of pressure on this one thing. So if you're really coming in and you're starting a new hobby and you're doing something like that, maybe I would sum it up as like, one, just in general, keep your expectations low of what you're going to get out of this one thing. And if you do, that's a bonus. Also, don't wait too long to do it, maybe. Like if you had the bass in your music room at home for a couple years and then you were going to go and do the Douglas camp, I would think that would be more intimidating because it might raise your expectations. You might be like, oh, I've been playing for 2 years and this is one of the first times I'm really going to be under the spotlight. Is there anything to that?
I'm just trying to remember the where I was. What I'd done prior to. I've been playing with the Douglas College Dues band.
Oh, yeah. I've played in bands like that. It wasn't the Douglas one, but I played in the New Westminster Community District Band.
Yeah, that was my first experience playing in a big band and being the bassist when there's 20 other players. And, I'd learned a lot from that already. But I wanted to meet people and start my own combos and that sort of thing. And I'd had the bass for a while and I had lessons for a while. But improv was, well, in the sense of soloing improv. I mean, I knew how to improvise bass lines, had to do that from the very beginning. But learning to play a solo, I really didn't have much of a clue about that when I started that program. James Dandifer was teaching, and he taught the theory part of it. And I remember asking him, James, how do you get started on a solo?
What did he say?
I said, just play the root. He said, play a seventh. I said, okay, and we'll just take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just get started somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson for learning anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, get started somewhere. I started by just going all over the place. Like, the intimidating factor for me was I didn't feel like I was very well trained. Like, I was getting a lot of learning from the people who were playing jazz in the community, but like in terms of directly studying with people and like working on my technique, like I wasn't really doing a lot of that. Certainly not relative to how much I was trying to go out there and play gigs and improvise while I was doing the gigs and stuff. Like I was just ready to go out and try things, and I was pretty raw, and so I didn't really kind of hunker down and examine how I was physically doing on the instrument for the first time until university. And I actually went to go see a chiropractor the summer before I went to university, because I was playing enough at that point that I was straining my neck, and my alignment wasn't good because of my posture. And so that was the first time that I ever thought about it, really. And then that, plus having regular lessons, the most that I ever did at that point, that's when I finally squared the circle and got over to the other side. I was trying to learn to improvise and be free and wild and play gigs and stuff, but I needed to catch up on the fundamentals too.
That was very much my experience at the Douglas College Summer Jazz Intensive. I had just done a week or perhaps 2 weeks at the VSO School of Music, also, their jazz workshop. That was my summer to sort of break out, get to know people, form groups, and that sort of thing.
The other thing I remember as one final note on the 2014 camp was that I'll always remember that particular week or two. I think it was was it 1 week or two? I can't remember.
One.
Yeah, okay, so it was just that 1 week. That 1 week, that was when I started drinking coffee for the first time every day because I was performing full time for the first time that year because I had just dropped out of CAP. So I was always out, and I was always out late, and I was going around places. That was the only time I had to wake up early to do anything, all year. And so then I was doing that plus waking up early. And so I started drinking coffee, even though up until that point I never had before.
So it was a life-changing experience for you.
Absolutely life-changing.
The drug, the wonderful drug, caffeine.
Okay. The other thing that is on my mind as I've gotten to know you over the last month or two was you hosted a concert where you performed out of your front lawn for the people on our street, Hamilton Street.
Mm-hmm.
I was so lucky to come and hear that. I didn't even want to go that night because I had just gotten my second vaccine 2 days before, and I was really not feeling very good.
Right.
And I credit my friend Steve Clements and his son Will Clements, who's been on the podcast recently, for being there. And I was considering going there for maybe 5. I was like, I'm going to go for 5 minutes, and I'm just not going to feel great, and so I'm going to pack it in after that. But when I saw that they were there and they were having fun, and there were 50 odd people there having fun. When I saw what it was, I was like, I'm so happy I'm here. I'm pumped. I'm sticking around for the whole thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that was a great day to sort of reconnect with you.
I'm curious how you decided to do that.
At the very beginning of the pandemic, March 2020, we didn't know where it was all going. We heard of people that were doing music from the front of their houses just to kind of cheer people up and to be neighborly and to kind of raise people's spirits in the face of this horrible thing that was starting to happen. And I thought, well, I could do that because I have a band that practices here at my house, and we just play out front one night. And it was something like March or April of 2020 when we decided we'd do that. And the band was in. We thought, yeah, we're going to do this, and it will work. And they'll socially distance in the boulevard, so we didn't block the street or anything. So we set a date, and I put it on Facebook, and I put it on the next door, and I started getting responses saying, it's become too dangerous to do that. You can't draw a crowd. No professional musician will get out there and do that. No, we're all holding back because you can't draw a crowd. Actually, the parents of some of the other players who are younger than me were contacting me and said, don't do it. And so, but I'd kind of promised people on the neighborhood blog that I would do this. So I said, I can't do this now. The pandemic has gotten too bad. It would not be safe. So I'll do it as soon as it becomes safe again. That was, July 27th, 2021.
There you go.
It was clearly safe. You could draw a crowd outdoors. It was legal. It followed the provincial guidelines. So we set our date, and we hired a drummer to join our group, and we played. It was great. We played 2 sets, and people came. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was really fun. It was so fun that the band wanted to do it again, but then there were people traveling and so on. Now the weather's cold, and next summer we'll do it again.
Yeah, there's a window of time for us to do that for sure, right? And you hit it. You hit it dead on. Because I was thinking, like, why doesn't this happen more often? And yeah, there's like mundane reasons why. Like either you're not going to have neighbors who are on board, and like the first time you try it, it's not going to work out, or it's just weather. Like you're just only going to be able to do it for a window of time.
It has to be beautiful. I mean, it can't be raining, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I definitely left that wishing that it happened more often and wondering how it could happen to some extent.
People came, people danced. It was nice. We will do it again.
Yeah. And what else did you get the chance to do like in July and August with your band?
Well, out of that came a couple more gigs. We were hired for a big festival that was held in Tipperary Park,
nice,
next to City Hall. It was called, I think, Recover New Westminster. It was all the organizations and nonprofits that worked to help people with recovering from alcohol and substance abuse and that sort of thing. And they had bands playing all day long. And I think we were the first one. We started that out. We started that afternoon out.
Yeah,
it was nice, outdoors, up on a big stage there.
And who did you have with you that day, whether it was your regular bandmates or others?
We played as a trio. Yeah. We are trumpet, piano, bass.
Yeah. It's a good lineup. That's trumpet, piano, bass, drums. That's the lineup that I used for my first album, and that's what I started playing with from a young age. Yeah, because I was inspired by Brad Turner Quartet.
Ah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Just copied that lineup. So who are the members of your band?
Michael Radney is our vocalist and trumpeter. And Strauss Whiteside is our piano player.
Mm-hmm. And then you were with Tyler Murray. He came and played drums with you for that outdoor gig that I was at.
Yes, we hired Tyler. I've played with him numerous times, and he was available, and we were thankful, and he had a good time.
Yeah. And there were some other young folks there too, like Will Clements and I, and there's another music student there, so we were hanging out with. And like you said, there were people dancing. There were families dancing together, and yeah, it was a great mix of people that you brought together.
Caden Gordon showed up with his trumpet.
Yes, that's right. Yes, forgot about that.
So he came and he sat in with us a little bit.
Yeah,
and I've played with Caden a lot. We used to be in a band together.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned when we were having our walk the other week about your previous band. Tell me more about that.
Benny and the Good Men was some of the same people. Strauss on the piano, Caden Gordon on trumpet. Ben McRae was the band leader.
Nice.
On his mostly clarinet, but sometimes saxophone. And I was the bassist. And we gigged a lot, yeah.
I walk by your house twice a day, 5 days a week, pretty much, you know? I mean, all I know, other than your cat, who I know,
yes,
is that sometimes I've heard music coming from your household, but, you know, it's a blur, so I'm not exactly sure why or for what occasion. So what music happens in your house?
The band practices there.
Okay, yeah.
It depends. Sometimes it's every second week. Other times it's every Tuesday. Tuesday nights.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good.
Is band night. The guys are pretty busy now. They're starting to be high school teachers. And so sometimes everybody in my family is a musician. And I was sort of the last one to actually get on stage. My wife, Lorraine, taught piano for, goodness knows, many decades. And there was a time when she was home with the young kids, and I went and taught in language school in the day. And then when I came back, I'd take care of the kids, and she taught the children in the neighborhood piano lessons, Royal Conservatory. Well, I looked after the kids. That's
nice.
kind of So my job was in the Language Institute, and her job was in the living room. That was her music studio. Both of our daughters are violinists, and they played violin there for many years. Occasionally, they'll bring their violins, and we'll play together. And my son Andrew is a guitarist. My wife Lorraine is not that fond of jazz, and I'm not that skilled at classical, so we don't play together that much. But the genre that brings us together as a whole family is Celtic music.
I love that because I've had my own time in Celtic music. I was so happy to hear that you did mention
maybe
that.
I mentioned that
and
before.
I was so happy to hear it.
We've actually gone out and performed once or twice as a family band playing Celtic music. I like to do more of that. The girls can play classical, but they can also fiddle. Both of my daughters spent years of their lives in Nova Scotia, each of them doing graduate degrees at Dalhousie. During those years, when one or both of them were there, we would be there every summer, and we went to folk festivals. That's where we heard Celtic music.
Nice. That's also where I've heard it, because I started a folk band and I played at some of those folk festivals, and I would try and run around the stages and see some different people on the days we were there. And, you know, we would not like tour for long periods of time, but we'd tour every weekend kind of thing, and we'd go to a festival and be there for 1 or 2 nights. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. Halifax was the first place that I ever toured for any reason, though, musically. It was the first place outside of the Lower Mainland that I ever went to on tour, because we went there with North Shore Celtic Ensemble for a summer trip with their program, with like the teenage performing group. We started in Halifax and we traveled by coach around quite a bit. Like we went from Halifax up to and around Cape Breton, and then to PEI, and then on over Confederation Bridge, and then going as far as Montreal through New Brunswick. I think it was like 2 weeks total, but first night was Halifax in July, and I absolutely loved it. I thought Halifax was like super New West in a lot of ways, you know, because it slopes down to the water. And yeah.
It's there's some similarities, the East and the West.
Yeah. That's one other place that I've considered living. I mean, I'm really happy to be in New West, but I always wondered if I would go there for some reason.
Yeah, both of my daughters lived there for years. Finally, my middle daughter, Larissa, came back after quite a number of years there. Very, very tired of the intensity of the winters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get a bit of snow here, but they really got a lot of snow there. And the storms were blinding, and they'd be sort of hunkered down for days. And that got to be, you know, for a West Coast person, tiresome.
I've never been there in the winter.
No, neither have I.
Okay.
I go there in the summer, and it's beautiful.
Okay, so if my mom is listening right now, Mom, you got to know that this is for real. Those winters are bad. You wouldn't do well there. Confirmed.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. Cape Breton is, the Cape Breton music and the fiddlers.
So it's kind of downstream of Scottish music.
Yeah. Yes. Lunenburg and the folk festival in Lunenburg. We've been there a few times.
I've never been there. That was one place that we were planning to go to with Early Spirit in the summer of 2020. So we ended up going there. We had to cancel everything.
Yeah, that's when we lost all our gigs as well. Summer 2020.
You're a contemporary of my parents, and I'm most familiar with my mom's kind of musical reference points.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if I would describe them, it would be like kind of folk singer-songwriter 70s would be like the main bag, but of course there was all the other stuff that's happened in the years since then. So like before you went on this learning to improvise journey, like where did music fit into your life? What did you listen to at different stages?
Good question. Well, I first learned to read music in the treble clef, because that's where my voice was as a little boy, in the church choir.
Nice.
And there was always a piano at home, so I knew my way around. I never really learned to play the piano, but I knew where all the notes were. So the church choir. Then at age 9, I took up the violin, and I played in the school orchestra until the end of grade 12. Never got to be that great, but I did play second and third violin in the orchestra.
Nice.
So that was 9 years of violin. When I hit 14, everybody played the guitar and did what we called hootenanny. That's a whole bunch of friends all get together in a house, and then there's 6 or 7 guitars and whatever else people play. And we sang, Blowing in the Wind and stuff.
So you sang folk songs?
Songs.
Like 60s songs?
Yeah, and this is the 60s. I was in high school in the 60s. Yeah. And we just had a great time, and we learned from each other. I never had any lessons. Friends showed me how to play guitar, and I got a guitar, and we strummed and we sang.
That's similar to what my mom did. My mom did it in the early 70s. She'd do, growing up Catholic, she'd do like folk masses. A little bit different because it's a couple
Interesting,
of
yeah.
years later, and the environment is a little bit different. But
Yeah.
they would sing together and play guitars together.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And of course, rock music was taking off. And the Beatles, I think, their album was released when I was 13 years old, I think.
That was like the big famous Ed Sullivan moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we listened to that and we tried to learn their songs. And it was just a lot of musical fun during high school. So I played violin in the orchestra and guitar out with my friends.
And then what happened next? Like once you got out of that formation phase, like from then on when you were growing up, and then where was music in your life? Either as a listener or playing. Like it could be just listening and being a fan as well.
During my undergrad years in Sonoma County, the sort of north of the San Francisco Bay, the wine country up there, that's where I went to my
in
first
California
college. I lived with other musicians, and we played together most every night.
And those are real hippies too at that time.
Yeah, I guess that's what.
Yeah.
If you saw us, you would say that's what you were.
It's a good word in my books.
I was a college student, and but we did rock music, we did folk music, we did most of those things. Not so much jazz, though I've always liked jazz.
But you didn't have the same like cultural moment for jazz. Like people in your generation generally didn't. Like you had the other one, the 60s one.
Yeah.
The rock and roll one.
My father knew more jazz songs than I did. Mm-hmm. And even in his last years, not so long ago, he would ride around in my car and listen to my playlist from my phone, and he could sing the words to those jazz songs.
So can my grandfather. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought this up. Thank you for bringing it up because I wanted to address it in some way, but I wasn't sure how. So, on your website, half of it is yours and half of it is dedicated to your late father. Is that correct?
That's right.
And did you set that all up and you wrote both sides of the website, so to speak?
I had my website, Baylis.ca was all mine, and it was basically about bass, basically bass.
There you go.
And my bands and some samples of music. You've been there and you've seen it in pictures and this and that. Then my father passed away April 2020.
Yeah.
At age 95. And of course that's pandemic and I couldn't go down, and we haven't been able to honor him with a celebration of life yet, but that will come. So what could we do? Well, we could make a website, and we could call on people to say what they had to say on the website. So we did that, and so I wrote a fair bit of it, and my brother wrote, and my sister wrote, and then other good friends wrote tributes and things, and that's how we put it together. And my son is good at making web pages, so
nice.
He put it all together with photos and.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, it's really touching. It's really nicely done. And I did want to ask you about it because it does tell you a lot about him if you read that side. And I did check it out. But it doesn't talk about music because there was so much else to talk about. So I left it being curious about where music fit into his life. Oh,
my father's life.
Yeah.
Well, he spent the last years of his life in a nursing home. He had Alzheimer's, and he lost his balance, so he couldn't walk. He was known through that nursing home for his singing.
Really?
He would never have said that he was a musician. None of us would have said that he was a musician, but he had pretty good sense of tune, and he loved to sing in church, and that's what he would do. He would sing hymns, and he'd wheel around in his wheelchair, and he was unabashed. Well, Alzheimer's does that to you, right?
Yeah,
you lose
rough.
your inhibitions for better and for worse. So he would sing at the top of his lungs, and there were times when I would wheel him in his wheelchair out in the town of Sonoma. There's some beautiful, beautiful restaurants, and so I take him out to a really nice restaurant, and he would break into song. This quiet, low lit. So
awesome.
he could sing, and it was mostly hymns.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and you mentioned that he knows the words to the jazz standards. It's because he and his generation would have had the same kind of cultural moment with that stuff as you guys did with the rock and roll
with
and
the
pop
Beatles,
music of the 60s, and specifically with the Beatles. Yeah,
it was Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I was curious about it and how it passed down. And you did say that everybody in your family is musical to some extent.
My mother was the musician in my family of origin.
Yeah.
And then then I took up the violin. My brother took up the French horn.
Yeah. So you said that your dad wouldn't have considered himself a musician.
No.
But so if everybody plays, who among you does? Like you do, but who else does? Does anybody else consider themselves a musician?
Among my family of origin?
Or your kids?
Well, in my present family, we're all musicians.
You do all say that you are. Okay, nice.
Yeah. My eldest daughter, Julia, she trained as a violin teacher, and she taught Suzuki violin. That's another thing that happened in our house. This is a while ago. She had a gap year between her bachelor's degree and her master's degree, and she spent that gap year living with us and teaching violin. Julia played in a folk combo for quite a while, but not jazz.
Yeah.
No, I'm the one who does jazz.
I'm also the one who does jazz, so we have a lot in common.
But of course the classical background is so valuable, having played in the orchestra for all those years.
Yeah.
And just reading music all my life.
There's a lot that gets easier because you have that background, when you go on and learn other stuff.
Yes.
You're prepared for some things that if I come in from being self-taught the whole time, or if anybody comes in new, like there's some hard things there that you're more acclimatized to, right? So what were the hard parts for you in the last 5 or 10 years? What are the hardest parts?
I love playing in a combo, and I love people to call tunes, and I'll just give me a tune and I'll play it.
You want somebody else to be calling the tunes, and you're right there ready to go.
I'm a side man, and I struggle playing alone, which is what you got to do. You got to practice, and it's hard for me. I mean, what I like to do when I practice is pull up a chart and play a song with iReal Pro, doing
with some kind of automatic accompaniment,
piano and drums in the background, and I'll just go through the songbook. But that's really, as my wife points out to me, that's not practicing. Practicing is your scales and your arpeggios and all that hard stuff that isn't as much fun. So I struggle to get myself to do that, and I know, to play in tune, you got to play every day, and you got to play all over your fingerboard.
Yeah, that's what Jody says, right? Is like the two main things are you play in tune with a good sound, right?
She likes to say, what is it she say? It's a word when you hit a note and it's really right, and it rings.
It's like a resonance kind of thing.
She says it pops. That's what she says.
Oh, okay. I don't know. That's nice.
It pops.
I like it.
Yeah. That's what you got to do. Every note should be that way. But the only way you can play that way is to do your scales in all keys every single day, and you do them double scales right up to the end of your fingerboard. And okay, I do that, but I don't do it as much as I would like to do it.
Work.
So that's the hard part.
Oh yeah, that's the hardest part for me for sure. That's the part I've had the least training in, and that's what I would attack. Once I figure out where music lessons are going to fit back into my life, is I'm getting on the bow, and that's going to be a priority.
It's interesting how playing arco, that is with the bow, I find it requires a lot more strength in the left hand.
Yeah,
you're playing the bow with your right hand.
You have to sustain the note.
Yeah, that's right. So it's building up those muscles, and the grunt work is hard for me because I playfully play. It's
totally.
for fun.
Totally. When does it work out the best for you to actually attack that? Like what happens, and when do you actually feel the most motivated to go and do that stuff?
You mean what time in the day?
It could be that, or it could be the set of circumstances. Like if you come home after,
if I'm alone,
okay, if you have a lot of time,
and I tend to get to it later at night. I'm a night person, and Lorraine, my wife, is a morning person. So there is some time sort of between 8 and midnight when she's sleeping, and it's a whole other part of the house, and she says it doesn't bother her that I practice. And I get into it.
Oh, nice.
And it tends to be late, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes after everything else is finished, even like tonight we'll have dinner and everybody will stay around till 9:30, and then I might be practicing at 10.
Wow, okay. I could never do that. I'm a morning person.
Aha.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for coming here into my music room. You've covered a lot of ground, and I feel like I know you so much better now. And I'm looking forward to following what you do. And I'll sign off just with anything you want to throw at me here. I'm going to ask, you've had this learning journey so far. What's something about it for which you're the most thankful?
Thank you so much. Also, I return the thanks. It's always an honor to have people ask you questions especially about yourself. What's a thing? I want to be as good a bassist as I can possibly be. It gives me great, great joy to play the instrument. The joy multiplies when I'm playing with others, and then it multiplies again exponentially when people are listening. And if they start to dance, that's the pinnacle.
Totally.
So I had a good time when they danced in the street in front of my house.
Well, next time you do that, I'll make sure I don't forget to join the dance floor then.
Okay. It'll be good.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Rhythm Changes podcast. If you haven't followed the feed yet, make sure you do. And think about your friends who might enjoy listening too. Tell them to search for the Rhythm Changes podcast, wherever they get their podcasts. If you want more from us, visit our website, rhythmchanges.ca, or follow @ChurnoffMusic on Twitter. That's me. The Rhythm Changes podcast is a Chernoff Music production.